to ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo, and this week with our In Conversation channel together with Strikey, we have a session not to be missed for sure. It's a conversation between David Strike and also Sue Crowe. So let me just introduce to you our two sessionists today. We have Sue Crowe, the owner of OZDive Expo, and also OZTek Advanced Diving Conference. So just a little bit more information of who Sue is. Sue is actually a journalist by trade. Sue is also a former editor of Scuba Diver Australasia magazine. She has driven her own marketing consultancy and been a director and general manager of Tabata, Australia. Active in and passionate about diving. Since first learning in 1990, Sue is actually a member of the Dive Industry Association of Australia. She's also a longtime member of the Australian Marine Conservation Society and also an Australasian Co-ordinator of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, a PADI OWSI since 1993. Although no longer actively teaching, Sue is currently owns and operate the OZTek Advanced Diving Conference and also the OZDive Expo. None other, the moderator for today is, of course, David Strike, and he is none other than ADEX Ambassador for Technical Diving Pioneer. So today they'll be talking about everything there is to talk about in terms of diving and also Australia. Herewith, without any further ado, let me just pass over the baton to Strikey. And Strikey, over to you.
Thank you, Nora.
You're welcome, always.
Bless you. Sue, it's lovely to see you. It's been quite some while, actually, since we sort of caught up. For the benefit of those of you who may not know where Sue lives, she's in Australia. It's about, she just said, about 4 hours or so north of Sydney. So although we're in the same state of Australia, we're separated by quite a bit of distance. Sue, good evening.
Good evening. Very nice to be here, Strikey.
Now, I thought what we would do is just have, as we used to do many, many years ago, I think it's been a long time since we sat down and over a coffee or perhaps something even stronger, just sort of chatted about shoes and ships and sealing wax and all the rest of it. So we'll just have a general conversation, but preparing for this evening, or preparing, just doing a little bit of homework. And I came across, which you might recall, some 25 years ago.
Yes, I've got a copy as well. That's right.
Yeah. And I think I even marked the page. Look, it's come out. You can actually even see us there.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah. Which was a wonderful sort of expedition, actually. But the reason for mentioning it, for people that may not be aware, on the Great Barrier Reef out of Cairns, north from Cairns, going up towards Lizard Island, is a stretch of reefs known as the Ribbon Reefs, and they stand on the very edge, the outer edge of the Great Barrier Reef, and they're absolutely fantastic sort of places to dive, filled with life. And on this particular occasion, it was an expedition organized by Michael Orr. It was the first time that nitrox had been used on the Barrier Reef. Right. We went out on a liveaboard vessel called Taka, and the idea was that a team of photographers would film continually over 24 hours the life of this particular reef, the Temple of Doom. And Sue and I had the actual job the day before, the 24 hours before, going around finding out where little life forms lived and tagging them for the photographers by tying little pieces of ribbon to the coral. And of course, at the end of the 24 hours, our job was to then go in again and recover all those little
Take
bits
all
of
the tags
ribbon,
back.
which, needless to say, we didn't manage to recover them all because we forgot where we'd put them all. So it's probably for months and months afterwards, divers visiting that particular dive site must have realized or wondered and suddenly thought, well, that's why they call it the Ribbon Reef, because of all of the ribbons.
The ribbons.
Yeah.
That's right. But if you think about that, that was probably the first time that like a baseline was recorded for a reef, and it's something that's then gone on for the Ocean Agency or Google Underwater, you know, to actually take a snapshot of a reef, to have a baseline so that we can track, you know, how it's going, on what it's going to do, or if it's going well or not so well. And you know, that reef was one of the, that particular one was one of the first ones of its kind. It was, you know, it was a great experience and lots of fun. I remember it well, very fondly.
Yeah, and I think right at the very end on that particular sort of 24-hour swam right in.
Yes, in fact, I have a fantastic memory of that trip and those minke whales, because we were in the middle of nowhere, absolutely, you know, no land anywhere at all. And it was over here, minke whale, everybody would swim over there and then over here. And I thought, I'm over this, because whenever we got there, of course, the minke whale had gone somewhere else. So I just thought, oh, well, I'll just swim around. And then underneath me, up out of the blue, came this minke whale, and he must have swum with me for like 10 minutes. And it was glorious. And then everybody caught up and he stayed around for a while, and then he off again. But that was probably the first time ever that I'd had a real sort of one-on-one connection, if you like, with an animal that's so big. It's really,
was for me
it's the most amazing thing. Yes,
I can still remember, you know, you're just looking into its eye and
right.
Intelligence there.
That's it. They look right into you. It's quite unnerving in some respects, but incredibly, I don't know, it's just a special thing.
Yeah,
never
that was
old.
That was a most enjoyable trip, and that was at the time of the Great Barrier Reef Dive Festival as well, wasn't it?
That's right. Well,
yeah,
indeed.
So I mean, this was obviously, when was that? 95, wasn't it?
95.
You've been diving for some while before then.
Well, I learned to dive pretty well by mistake, but in 1990. So that's when I learned to dive. And
How did you learn by mistake?
Well, it was basically, you know, have all these people that said I always wanted to dive and I knew what I wanted, and I definitely wasn't. I had always been a swimmer, and I was very lucky to be brought up for a lot of time in the Caribbean. So swimming was good, and snorkeling and all the rest of it. But I never really thought I could dive, because every time I had dived down with my snorkel, my ears would hurt, because of course no one had ever taught me how to equalize. So I'd sort of decided scuba diving wasn't very good. And then I had a boyfriend, and an American boyfriend who I met there, and they were doing hurricane aid relief, and they were on Montserrat, which is where we were. And then they flew to Jamaica to continue doing hurricane aid relief. And so I thought, so I was actually waiting for my visa to come back to Australia. So I was just kind of killing time in the West Indies. So I thought, well, I'll go. Never been to Jamaica. Fantastic. I'll go. And so I went to Jamaica and helped, you know, with the aid relief. But when I got there, I discovered there was a big crew of American Highlines. He was American from Alaska, and they worked 6 days, and then they'd all learnt to dive. And on the 7th, they went diving. And I thought, well, I've come all this way to see this bloke. I'm going to have to learn to dive. And so I learnt to dive as well. So it was really all because of him. And I remember, first of all, at that time, Jamaica wasn't a fantastic place. I mean, it was a fantastic place to be, but it was quite dangerous. And my first actual experience of Jamaica was that I landed, and then I was met, and we had a you know, someone who was driving and someone who met me, and we were going to top end of the island, where we were going through Kingston, and then all of a sudden this big Jeep screeches up and all these blokes climb out with submachine guns and camouflage, jackets and stuff, and start shouting. And, the West Indian patois, when they get going, it's almost impossible to understand. And so the driver said, don't worry, leave it to me. And there's all this going on, and they're rifling through luggage. Not that there was anything exciting in the luggage. And in the end, I had to pay $600.
Hey.
So yeah, so I was like, wow, okay. So it was 600 Jamaican, to be fair, but still, I was not, it was surprise anyway. So it all calmed down. They took their $600, they packed it all up, got in the car, and I went, who the hell was that? What's all that? He said, oh, that's our local police. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was actually quite dangerous at that time. Like, you couldn't go anywhere on your own.
Yeah.
And we had an armed guard wherever we went. We had an armed guard. So actually, underwater was a really good place to be because it was safe. But the reefs there are out of sight. So, my first ever dive was off the edge of the reef, and a big blue spotted eagle ray came in out of the blue and swam around us, and I was just hooked. It was.
And where were you living? Which island?
Well, I was living. Well, I'd come to Australia in '88,
right?
And I'd done a bit of traveling and had worked around, run out of money, had to go away to get my visa to come back. So I didn't want to go back to England. I didn't want to go back to London, because I thought, well, if I go there, I'll just get stuck and I'll never leave again. So I thought, well, I'll go home. So Mum and Dad, my parents lived on Montserrat, which is a little island close to Antigua. And so I was sort of based, met this fellow, Charlie, and whisked off to Jamaica. And so really, I have a lot to thank him for in that respect.
So you never bothered, sorry, how long were you here the
just
first
a year,
time? Then,
just a year,
right.
A year, yeah. And then I came back, and it's, it's one of those things to actually qualify to come in. I had to, get a tick in the box, because I didn't have the right tick in the box. So when I came back to Australia, then I actually went back to university. And did a year, and got my certificate in journalism, even though I'd done an internship in London. It didn't have the right tick in the box for the credentials that they wanted.
Right.
So I was just killing time in West Indies. So, it was great. Good place to be.
What was the attraction of Australia? I mean, I would have thought West Indies would have been just superb.
I had been in London, and I had, and it was fantastic. And I had a great time in London, but I had also, what prompted me to leave London was I'd actually I think I'd probably been burning the candle at both ends, and I'd got quite ill. So I had a bit of a readjustment of everything, and I thought, right, I'm going to pack up and go off and do something. And so I did that, and I came back. My flatmate in London was an Australian, so we travelled around and then landed back in Australia. But Australia at that time, and even today, is a perfect mix of, well, Sydney and probably Melbourne especially, of a perfect mix of the West Indies and London, if you think about it. Because in Sydney, you've got enough of the, if you like, culture and business, and you've couple that with all the beaches and the outdoor life. So if you're an outdoor person, it smashes the UK. The Caribbean is very nice, but for somebody who is sort of mid to late 20s and just starting to get going, it's probably not the greatest place to be from that perspective, but it's a very good place to be killing time. Yeah. That's right.
And then, so when did you become an instructor?
Well, I came back, so I learned in 19, and by the time in Jamaica, so I'd come and gone, and then when I came back, I just continued it, and I was diving out of Pro Dive and working, and I was working when I first arrived. You pretty well quickly run out of money, so I had run out of money and I needed a job. So And I wanted a job with a car because in Australia, if you haven't got a car, it's really hard to get anywhere. When it certainly was then. So I answered this little ad in the paper, and for a journalist with a car. I thought, oh, that's fantastic. And I went and I got the job, which was brilliant. And I came back to my flatmates and I said, I've got this, I've got the job. And they went, what is it? And I said, it's the Poultry Digest, Pork Journal, Prime Beef, and Rural Business. And they're still going strong. Actually, they're out now, published out of Singapore. And that was it. I used to drive around in my car and visit all the farmers, and then I would dive on the weekend. And I just loved it so much. So then I embarked on, just did courses and courses and courses, and then I eventually got my diving instructors in '93. So it was good. It was good, yeah. But,
and then you became editor of Scuba Diver. How did that come about?
Well, that was.
I mean, I imagine sort of working on the Pork Journal wouldn't.
Well, indeed, you were as surprised as I was. So I'm working on the Pork Journal. When I came back, they said, "Are you sure it's not a porn magazine?" So I went, "No, I'm pretty sure. It's just beef and cows and chickens." But no, so I was doing that, and then a girlfriend of mine sent me a note and said, "Sue, I've seen a job with your name on it." And I said, what's that? She said, they're advertising for editor of Scuba Diver magazine. And I said, well, I've never been an editor. And she said, no, but it's, what have you got to lose? And I thought, what have I got to lose? So Yaffa had the magazine at that time, and I applied and I got the job. And I, got this job as editor and had never done anything like it before. But luckily I had a girlfriend who was a journalist, who was at Clio, who was working in Clio this time. And I'd ring her up and say, they have to go to a pagination. What's that? And she goes, it's okay, Sue, it's just where you put the pages down, just put where okay, I can do that, because there were all these words that I'd never really paid much attention to. So it was a pretty steep learning curve. And the other thing that I discovered was how little I knew about diving and about the diving industry, because when you're in that little sort of instructor bubble, that's really all you know. And suddenly, as editor, I was supposed to know. I always remember Kat Holloway, who was the editor before me. She had just read Sheck Exley's book, and she said, "Oh no," she's going waxing lyrical about Sheck Exley. And I said, "Who is Sheck Exley?" And she was like, oh, "What? You don't know who Sheck Exley is? It's a disaster." And I'm like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about anything, but you learn pretty fast. And part of the beauty about being a journalist, I think, is that you don't necessarily have to be an expert on anything. You just have to ask the right questions. And hopefully everybody will tell you, and you go right.
It's the old saying, experts are on tap, never on top.
That's right.
Yep.
So that's what happened. And I soon, realized that there was a lot to learn. But I loved that job. That was a great job. So then I got to dive all the time,
And presumably there would have been a fair amount of travel.
There was a bit of travel. I mean, there was certainly more travel than I had been doing before. And so, yes, you got a great opportunity. But funnily enough, I had organised this little trip to Fiji with the Fiji Tourism Bureau. And it was just sort of 2 weeks was about the max you could get out of the office without it being completely, too much. And so the Fiji Tourist Bureau, who were absolutely brilliant, set out this sort of 6-week program, and I couldn't go. And I was like, oh no, that's just, so who could I send? So Kat, or Kathy as she was then, now she's Kat, said, well, I said, can you go? She was freelancing, and she said, yeah. So she did the 6 weeks in Fiji with Andy Belcher, who went as the photographer. And in the course of that was a trip on the Naya, which is a liverboard out of Fiji, very nice. And she came back and said, I don't know what to do. I've just met the most wonderful man. And that was Rob. And now they are, got 2 little girls and live and still run night.
Yeah.
So
that was all down to you.
Oh yes, I take all credit. No, not really. I think that bit was entirely up to them. But it is funny how sometimes that works out, that life, you know, I couldn't go and therefore she did. And that's how she met Rob. And, you know, they ran the liverboard for a long time and still have Naya, although of course at the moment it's not really doing much.
And you had, well, I know that you did a lot of product testing. Oh
yeah, no, I mean the beauty of that job was that you got to try everything new. I got to jump out of helicopters and do safety courses. You know, you and I did that nitrox course. You know, and we did the Draeger rebreather together. Do you remember that?
Oh yes.
And so you got to try all these things when they first came out, and that I think that was just the best thing. You know,
I can still remember actually a night dive that we did. I'm sorry, this might embarrass you, but a night dive at Shelley where you were testing some lights and torches. And in those days, very few people would park at Shelley Beach, certainly at night in the car park.
That's right. Yeah.
And we got out of the water. And you, of course, one of those people that never ever peed in your wetsuit.
Oh no, I'm polishing my hair as I speak.
So I remember you going in front of one of the parked cars in the bushes in front of a parked car to have a quick pee.
That was the norm.
There were people in the car and they turned their headlights on.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I've forgotten that. Oh, yes. Well, I'm sure that's not the first time I've been caught out. I've you know, had to go to the loo in many an unusual place, and it's always very difficult. I remember being in Tasmania, and I was on a trip in Tasmania, and we were on quite a small boat, no toilet, and we were all in dry suits, and literally you just had to practically take everything off and then just hang your ass over the edge of the boat and just hope there was not too many people around, because there was no other choice. I mean, now there are more options for women in dry suits.
Yes.
In those days there were not so much.
Yeah. But I also remember at that sort of period of time you were deeply interested in the commercial schools that had started up, the ADEX schools, and pumping concrete underwater. I think that was
right. Well, one of them was I really wanted to pump concrete, but the other one was I wanted to weld something.
Right.
That is something I have never done that, but I would still like to do that. And I really love all the commercial divers and the police divers and the clearance divers and what have you. I mean, it was always fascinating to me. You know, I'd get a bunch of clearance divers learning to dive because they're clearance divers, they can patent, but they still needed their certificate so that they could go recreational diving. And that just always amused me, because they were, you know, they're special. You know, they are unbelievably talented and totally fearless. And it was they were great fun to teach, because, you know, it was a piece of cake, really.
And what about the police divers? They would be sort of
the police divers. I have a real soft spot for the police divers, and have actually written various, well, actually now quite a lot, because, you know, been around for quite a long time. But initially it was for their 25th that I was in with the magazine, and so that was really good. And that was when I first met John Marshall, who, you know, is just wonderful. And then I got involved in a TV program. I remember that Blue Water Diving, I think it was called. I can't remember. Blue Water Dreaming, I think it was. And one of the stories was the police, and the producer had a massive crush on one of the police divers, and so we were all supposed to be going out on this shoot where they were looking for evidence. And so, you know, they're a really pragmatic lot, the clearance divers. There's no there's no messing around. Anyway, she turned up for this shoot in a short skirts and heels, and we were all going on a boat to do this thing. And of course, the boys just took one look and said, "You can't wear that." And then gave her this huge baggy blue overall set she had to troll around in all day after that. But no, they did. They got in the water and found a gun that you know, somebody had thrown off the bridge at Glebe, and you know, it's a very difficult job. It's not a job that I would like to do, but they're just I just have a real soft spot for them. I got on with them, and so there was a period of time when there were all sorts of, you know, stories on the clearance divers and the police and their training regime. It's very difficult to get into the police divers, and hardly anyone passes. It's a bit like the clearance. So you know, they're definitely a breed on their own. It's good. Yeah.
And what you were also deeply interested in photography.
Yes,
Did that grow up at the same time that you were editor?
Well, yeah, because I had never really done any. And there was a Nikonus 5 came with the job. So I had a Nikonus 5. And in fact, I did my very first trip as an editor on the Undersea Explorer, which went off to Osprey Reef, which was brilliant. And I had this new camera. And so, you know, I was super keen to do all this work, and I had it on auto because I really had no idea what I was doing. And so I got all this advice from people who knew heaps more than I did about camera, and I took all these pictures, and it was a brilliant trip, perfectly, you know, it was 200 meters visibility, and it was a calm sea, and it was absolutely fantastic. And of course it was film, right? So I took over like 400, and so I sent this all back, and I got an envelope back. Every single one was completely black. Every single photo
was exactly the same, out to Osprey Reef.
It was so disappointing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that was one of the drawbacks of film, of course. You had
absolutely. You had to wait, and so that was devastating.
And it was expensive as well. I seem to remember what was it, Velvia and Provia, the two.
That's right. Were the two big ones.
$75.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Yaffa probably weren't too impressed, having, you know, put 400 completely black photos through.
Yeah.
So I did learn a lot. I always remember interviewing David Dubois fairly early on, and he blew me away. He was so fantastic. I always remember him saying, if you want to be an underwater photographer, you can't do anything else. You just have to do your underwater photography. And consequently, I'm still floating around in amateur range. I certainly know what a good picture looks like, and I think if you've edited any, you know, underwater or been any sort of photographic judge of competitions and things, it's pretty difficult to then get your own photo out and get. So I actually migrated to video, and I really enjoy taking video, but it's still very amateur hour. But it's I love everyone else's photography, but those who really do that's what they do. Even in the digital age, I think now you also have to be almost as good in post-production as you are taking the photograph.
Who were the I mean, you would have met and interviewed an awful lot of leading lights in diving during that period of time.
Well, yes and no. Sometimes it came in, but I have to say that David Dubois was definitely a highlight for me, because he was so gracious, you know, because at that time he was like this, you know, huge star. So, well, I mean, he still is, but he was right in the sort of heyday of, you know, National Geographic, when, you know, he would go out with sort of 20 cameras, and if he needed something to get a certain shot, he would go to, I don't know, the camera people and say, I need this, and they would then make it or create it or find it. And so it was now I think it's much harder to be I mean, we've got much more sophisticated stuff, but I think you don't get that the same amount of support necessarily. I think you're a bit more on your own. And he was just lovely. And he always said to me, you know, I remember asking him about, you know, what was his favorite? And he said, oh, you know, I said, what about drift diving? He said, I hate drift diving. Don't ever put me in a drift dive. He said, that's like trying to take photo out of a moving bus. Forget it. You're never going to do it. So I've always remembered that. Yeah, it's funny what you remember. But he was definitely a highlight for me. So generous with his time and was really good. Because I mean, at that time I was just this little, you know.
And you were also sort of slowly, I guess, becoming involved in the marine conservation.
Oh yeah, I was fairly heavily involved in marine conservation from an early on, and that was I actually joined in those days. The Australian Marine Conservation Society had like local groups. It wasn't today. It's more of a lobbying, you know, very successful lobbying, and they do far more really than we used to do in a sort of a little local group. But I joined the local group, and it was run out of Manly, and we did some fantastic, great stuff, and that's how I got involved in Mardi Gras and the Underwater Bush Society. Gay and lesbian, you know, it's a Sydney gay club who I'd never heard of, because I don't know if you remember this, but in Mossman, in Sydney, because for people who don't go to Sydney, car wash, and on top of the car wash was this huge pink whale, you know, like one of those cartoon whales. Do you remember that? And then they got bought out and you know, conservation group, and I said, oh, we should ask them for the whale, because we used to go to all these little sort of, you know, exhibition and, you know, spout up, because then we were definitely trying to save whales. It was a really topical thing. And so they gave us this enormous whale. So we had this pink whale on a trailer, and we used to cart it around and do on the weekend or what, you know, whatever we were doing. And then the Sydney Underwater Bushwalker Society came along and said, can we borrow your whale for the Mardi Gras parade? And we were like, definitely, absolutely. And so the pink whale got glorified. We all, Jane came, we were all mermaids, and we had to go and practice, and I got involved in the group, and our whale got beautiful sparkling eyelashes, and, you know, the whole theme of the float was save the whale, and it was fantastic. I think we did about 3 or 4 different themes, you know, with that group, and then I did quite a lot of instruction with them, and that was a great fun time. But that's the Marine Conservation Society on a local level was quite different, and then I have always stayed, because conservation is a never-ending job. It's, you know, and it's a bit, it's
and you're still very passionate about
I still am. I sometimes get a bit depressed, because everyone says today pretty much what we all said before and has done for the last 30 years. But as long as there are people who, you know, will take time out and do their bit, it makes a difference. Absolutely. So totally, conservation is very important. I mean, we wouldn't have, you know, what we have today if it wasn't, and that's hard enough just to keep what we've got.
And sorry, how long were you at Scuba Diver?
I was at Scuba Diver for just over 8 years. Right. So I learned a lot. I came out of that with a much better understanding of the diving industry as a whole, because what the beauty
we were in the Dive Industry Association, of course.
Well, that's right. Although I came in at sort of the end of that, but still, yes, absolutely. But I think the beauty of any sort of magazine is that you are apolitical, because you're dealing with everybody on all levels. So it was a big learning curve, but I did get to meet all the different parts of the diving industry, which I hadn't before, and so therefore, you know, it was good. I came out as a much more rounded understanding of all the different facets of diving, which, you know, when I was an instructor, really, I was pretty well quite blinkered. But by the time you've met, you know, your clearance divers and your commercial divers and your police divers and your, you know, technical, and you've thrown yourself out of helicopters and you've met this and the other, you understand a bit more about the politics. And not that I'm very good at the politics, but, you know, definitely understood a bit more.
And so what happened after Scuba Diver? You then moved into the equipment side.
I did in the end. I mean, initially, I didn't really know what to do. And so I started a little agency, because one of the problems on the magazine was getting people to give me information. Like everyone was quite willing, but never quite got around to it. Or so it was always a scramble to get, you know, copy and press releases. And then I thought, you know, there's a bit of a gap here. I think I could help people write, you know, product reviews and actually help them get their stuff published, even if I'm not at the other end. And so I did that for a while, which is how I ended up with Tabata as one of my clients. And eventually, I think Stephen, when he left, he was managing. When he left and got promoted to America, he wanted somebody who was essentially apolitical. So I basically came with no previous baggage from you know, any sort of equipment, or, you know, I'd sort of dealt with everybody. And I think that, you know, it's a very small industry. And when he offered that position to me, of course, that was another job I'd never ever done in my life. That was a massive learning curve. And that was quite hard at the beginning.
In what respect, Sue? What areas were there?
Well, for a start, you know, it was an international company, and I was in charge of Australia. So that suddenly I had a lot more responsibility. And the Japanese are very precise, and they did like accounts, huge spreadsheets of accounts every month. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. And that was completely new to me. So I had to go and learn all about that. I took courses, and so that was something I'd never really had to understand or be. You know, I had to learn about stock. I had to learn about distribution. I had to learn about wholesaling and navigate the, you know, the stores.
Did you have any sort of input into equipment design? And
yeah, definitely. Although sometimes I wonder, like, one of my biggest things was at that time, you know, that particularly for women, it was really used to irritate me, and that they'd have all these marketing shots of women in bikini with their new BCD on, and it's like, oh, come on, you know, it's like the women are making the decision, right? No one's going to dive in a tiny weeny bikini. Like, it's just not practical. And people look just as good in a one piece, you know, which at least is the least you could do. I used to have big rows with the marketing department, mostly Stephen Ashmore, and I invariably lost, because that's you know, marketing was all about
sex sells.
Yeah. And it was all actually directed at the men. So, you know, but I don't know whether they thought men were all going to be buying our equipment or what. But and there were more women in diving, and we wanted, you know, not just pink. Thank you, pink is good, but there are other colours out there which would be quite nice to have. Also, we wanted equipment that fitted, and we're not just straight for the men, basically, just made smaller with a pink trim. Doesn't really cut it when it comes for ergonomics. And so there was a lot of that, but they were very good at least trying to understand, I think, at that time. And I'd like to think that we've made a lot of inroads Definitely, I think now there's a lot more choice for women in when it comes to equipment and stuff.
And I think they were, I seem to recall sort of, quite some while ago, interviewing Dave Balson.
Yes.
There.
Yeah.
And he was quite sort of proud, I think, of the fact Tabata had really led the way in different coloured outfits for women.
Were always really good, and of course initially we essentially did software, so your mask, fin, snorkel, and then that is a way to inject colour into what is otherwise often quite black, basically. And so
nothing wrong,
so that
nothing
was really
wrong
good.
with black, nothing wrong with black dive gear.
No, look, I've got a black top on, it's all good, but it was good. But no, Tabata they've always been, and I think some of that is the Japanese, because the Japanese love color, and so that was a natural fit for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good, but old habits, they did a lot of trouble. I think a couple of years ago when they brought out a marketing with a woman, video of this woman underwater in a bikini with this new BCD. She didn't have any regulators. It's all just very aesthetically. And they got slammed for that because it's like, come on, that's like 1980. They can move on, please. So it's quite funny. It's interesting to see that's still still the case.
What sort of technical equipment did they have?
In those days,
waterproof suits. And
we brought in waterproof when I was there. That's not really technical. I mean, they obviously do fantastic dry suits, and they do a whole range, which was good. But really, Tabata, and certainly in the early days, was purely recreational. And it was only as we sort of, if you like, grew, that we would either bring in new agencies like waterproof, which was really good, and underwater, kinetic and, CNC. So you'd bring in various things that Tabata didn't make because they're actually a manufacturer. And so, if you like, you've got your different pillars. But, they even today, David often says to me, well, what do you think? It's like, well, there are so many people who specifically make technical and do a really, really good job of it, that I don't know that space is quite crowded, and that frankly, why So,
you used to do a lot of swimming as well for the run swimming competition.
I still do quite a lot of swimming, but I got really into ocean swimming, and ocean swimming, particularly in Sydney, is brilliant because they have got so many. I was living in Sydney, just trying to think where it was, and I used to swim in the harbour every morning. It's a big harbour pool, and I would swim up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then a gentleman came up to me and said, "I've seen you swimming, and you're obviously swimming quite a long way. Have you ever done any ocean swimming?" I went, "No, I didn't even know." And so he had done a lot of ocean swimming and had actually done a lot of swimming for Australia, and he basically coached me into it. And then once I got going, it's a fantastic community, and it doesn't matter what shape or size or age you are. It's it's just get in there and have a go, and they do anything from a kilometre to 3. Oh, well, I'm not a really long distance. I would say probably 3 kilometre in an ocean. Open ocean is probably the furthest but it's good. But
and it's a world of difference from swimming in a pool, isn't it? The open ocean, because of the waves.
Waves, definitely. But I always remember, because there are people who swim every day, particularly in your area, Manly, this, that, and the other. And there was we had one of the ocean, and the presenter obviously didn't know too much about the swimming community. And the lady who won the over 80 or the over 75 age group was this, nuggety Australian woman who, you know, done her, whatever it was, we were swimming 2.5 or whatever K. And he was so impressed. He was just being so, oh, that's fantastic. You know, 80 years old and you've done it. He said, you must be really proud of yourself. She said, not really. I do it every day. And so, you know, people who swim, they just swim. They just want to be out there and go swimming.
Yeah.
You know, great. But he just, everyone met. So it was, yeah, so I did do that. I haven't done that up here. I still swim, but where we are now is not, it's a bit more surf orientated. So
yeah.
harder.
And we're fortunate here in that we've got all of those ocean pools.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, sort of unique to Sydney.
Yeah, well, actually, they're going to build one in Port Macquarie.
Oh, really?
So I was, and it's just, you know, not far from me. So this is fantastic because one of the things I really miss up here is an ocean to swim in. It's not that's not, you know, full of massive surf waves, because that's quite hard work. And so, yeah, about 2 beaches now, they're going to put in a harbour pool or a beach pool. And I can't wait. That'll be fantastic. Yeah. So,
I must admit, I mean, I go every morning and ideally sort of down to the rock pool, except in the height of winter when it's freezing cold and I head off to Manly to the heated pool. But
that's right. Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, so swimming is always good. And of course, Tabata did a range of swimming goggles, which were great. And so that helped too, you know, that I was always at those events.
So we're getting, God, we haven't even covered part of it yet. And now, so now you are, of course, running OZTek and the OZDive.
Yeah, OZDive. Well, this, as you're aware, that we've morphed in Australia slightly from the original, sort of when it was only technical. And that's partly because of Australia, I think, and the uniqueness of our diving industry. We haven't really got anything else for the rest. And so people are wanting something for divers who are looking for more, either more travel, more training. And of course, the technical industry need people to move into to become better divers and to, you know, stretch themselves, and whether it be in a dry suit or, you know, it doesn't really matter. I think as soon as you get slightly out of the recreational, you want to be able to do more. And of course that's, you know, that one feeds the other. So the OZTek is still traditionally the technical conference. And the OZDive will be providing something more for those who are interested in diving on any level at any point in time. Yeah. So, but COVID's making it a bit tricky at the moment. For all of us.
Over the years, you would have attended a lot of shows over the years.
And yeah, that's right. Well, I have, but I mean, originally, you know, OZTek's probably the one I've been to the most. And I do remember when you were running that, and you said, "Come on, Sue, you don't have to come." And I was in the magazine, and we were purely recreational. Like, oh, this is going to be a lot of blokes in black gear.
And it wasn't, was it?
In a huddle. And I thought, oh, and I really didn't know what to expect, and it just blew me away. You know, Jim Bowden and Anne Kristovich, and
I was about to say Dr. Anne Kristovich.
And Nuno Gomez, and I just and even though I wasn't a technical, I just loved it. I loved the stories and the people. I was just so impressed with their, you know, dedication, and I was pretty much fan right from the get-go. Haven't missed one since then. Well, obviously now it's a bit difficult to miss it, but but that's so a lot of shows, but that's definitely my favorite.
And of course you were at the '96, the Tech Diving Conference at the ADEX Tech Diving Conference.
That's
where
right.
we had those wonderful group of people that were at.
It was good. I was completely out of my depth, but it was great nonetheless. And it's just another learning curve, I think.
Yeah,
it's
I think because Walter Stark was there, wasn't he?
Yeah. And
Wings.
Michael Menduno.
Michael,
That's right. So
where we won the tug of war, did we not?
Against, I think we did.
CDI techies.
I know, it's funny. Those were
party.
Interesting, those days. No, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
do you get to do much diving now, Sue?
Yeah, I still dive. In fact, I was this year. I finally, after years and years of wanting to go, I was booked on a trip to Antarctic to dive in Antarctic, and I got down to Ushuaia, and then the boat was cancelled, and I came back. But in preparation for that, I went basically back to school, and it was really brilliant. I had completely forgot how much fun learning new things was. I did a GUE fundamentals and learned all sorts of things.
That's quite an eye-opening course, isn't it?
It was one I would recommend for any diver.
Yeah.
It's really great. So I've really got into that. So now I practice and I am going to go for my Tech 1, which is really quite amusing at this point in time. But it came about because I wanted to make sure that when I went to Antarctica and dived, I was prepared, and everything was going to work, and my suit was fine, and had the right equipment, and because it's, for me, I mean, a lot of people get to go all the time, and that's great, but for me, that's been a bucket list thing for me to dive under the ice. I just can't remember. I just really have wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's probably not going to happen now till 2022, unfortunately, because I did get to Ushuaia, and then the boat was cancelled, and the Greg Mortimer left the day before, and I don't know, but they ended up off Ecuador, and everybody had to be flown home, and COVID's right smack in the middle of COVID, and that was tricky. So, and this year I think it's going to be very difficult for the boats to get to Antarctica again, certainly for the general public, if you like, and the expeditions that go out there. So it's been flipped over for another year. So got plenty of time to practice. So that's good.
How do in terms of conservation and sustainability of areas, I mean, the Antarctic to me is one of those areas that is very needful of protection. And how do you reconcile sort of tourism and?
Well, it's difficult because, and there's always different types of tourism. So the sort of boat that you and I would probably go on is going to be a smaller expedition boat that does more of the niche, if like, activities. So diving, snorkeling, as opposed to the great big ones. But they are very careful, and there is a committee where they try and, I don't know, look after it. So yes, it's very difficult.
And sort of police who goes there and
and I think you have to have a license.
Yeah.
Not that everyone pays attention to that, but you can only put it in place. Yeah.
Just back to that. So you're doing your Tech 1.
Well, I'm practicing for my Tech 1.
You're practicing for your Tech 1.
Yeah.
Do you have you ever been tempted to, quite apart from the fact, using the Atlantis, and when I think we test dive or try dive the Drager Ray as well.
That's right.
Cat, that one. But have you ever been tempted to get back into rebreathers at all?
Oh yeah, I would. But I think you do have to. You do have to be doing the. For a rebreather diver, you've got to be doing a lot. But it's definitely. I'm very interested in it. But I think you do have to be quite dedicated to it and be able to use it. And where I am at the moment, I mean, the diving, luckily off here, you know, I'm only 40 minutes from Southwest Rocks, and you've got Foster and you've got Nelson Bay and everything. So there's lots of great diving where I am. It's you know, a bit more countrified, I suppose. So you'd be very much on your own with a rebreather. Not that would matter necessarily. It's just, it's sort of horses for courses. It's a bit like I saw a post of yours the other day, which was, you know, this is all my equipment, and now you understand why I've gone down to a single cylinder, because it
Yes.
weighs a ton.
Yeah.
So you know, there's a part of that, and the beauty of a single cylinder for the normal or the majority of diving that I do, I don't, you know, it's not really required to do anything else. So it's pretty hard to sort of justify it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I was just looking at, there's a question.
Yes, we're getting close to the end of the time. There's I see Nora's actually asked a question, and it was back to the Tabata, your time there, about colours, and she did say, what about other colours?
Yeah. Well, Nora,
pink is so sexist, she said.
But you know, a lot of women like pink. I have nothing against pink. But it's interesting, like waterproof. I mean, I've got a fantastic orange dry suit from Waterproof. But the reason I got hold of that was when they made this particular dry suit, they made 6 in different colors. So they had a purple, a bright pink, like it's a really luminous pink, bright orange, and then I think there was a blue and a red and something else. And they took it to DEMA, and they got everyone to pick 2 colors for the women that they thought that they could sell, because you can't, part of the problem is manufacturing. You can't just, you know, can't just produce another color. Like you've actually got to do a certain amount, and then if you don't sell them, then it's a problem. So they were, and everybody voted for pink and red. And so when I was looking for a new suit, I said to the owner, well, do you remember, you know, that, have you got any? And he said, well, what size are you, Sue? Because of course they only made one. They made, you know, an orange and a purple, and they all made them all medium. And luckily I'm a straight medium, and so I've got the, you know, this one-off orange suit, which I adore because it's not pink.
Often overlooked is the fact that some colours are just so much better at being seen.
Yeah.
If you should be unfortunate enough to be sort of cast adrift and drifting around in the open ocean.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll definitely will be able to be spotted. Just hope it's not. Just hope it's not face down. If that's the case.
Yes.
But yeah,
and, have you had any sort of near misses in that?
I've certainly had some heart palpitating moments, definitely, and it's usually because I've made a mistake somewhere along the line. So I think one of the first, or I didn't know, you know, it's usually the way. I remember being on a in the Solomons, and we were all got in the water, and everybody had breathed and everything seemed fine, and then we got down to sort of 30 meters, and it was really hard to breathe, and I looked at my gauge and the needles going backwards and forwards, and I knew what was going on. Like I knew that my cylinder wasn't on properly, and so this was what was causing the resistance. But my buddy, who shall remain nameless, was a long way away from me, and so I sort of reached around and tried to turn it on properly, and in doing that turned it off. So it's not very successful, and luckily there had happened to be a diver pretty close to me with his nose in the reef, and I was able to tap him on the shoulder. My air on, please. he just looked at me and then did it. And another scenario.
Hopefully he was on another boat.
No, he didn't. I didn't get it. No, I got absolutely. But I think everyone was, you know, and then somebody, in fact, it was Richard Nichols. I think he was on, or when I came back, I think I said, this is what happened. And he said, well, you know, you always need to purge. Don't just breathe out of your regulator, always purge it and look to check. And it's like, oh, so you learn something every day. And I mean, I've been in teaching, and you can't know everything. Some things you learn the hard way, but as long as you get to be at the end, on the boat at the end of the day, I think it's lessons well learned. And hopefully you then pass that on. Someone else doesn't have to learn it like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely had my fair share, but nothing that hasn't worked okay in the end. Yeah.
And quite apart from organising, hopefully in a post-COVID sort of
hopefully post
the OZTek and OZDive thing. What else are you doing?
Well,
you're involved with the Dive Industry Association.
Yeah, Dive Industry Association, and I still do, you know, with the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. I've got my little, you know, I'm the webmaster at the moment, but we all share various things. And so I do a lot of that. That's all voluntary. But I also do quite a bit of teaching computer content management systems, and that keeps my head above water while all this madness is going on, and we try and work out what to do about it.
And the just back the Our World Underwater Scholarship up some really sort of top, bright, brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic. People. And it was when I was at Tabata when Jane first brought that, if you like, or was looking to bring it into Australasia, and we needed a sponsor. And so she came to me and said, you know, would Tabata consider sponsoring the scholar, and introduced me to various scholars and everybody. And it was like, well, this is fantastic, of course. And I'm very pleased that, you know, Tabata has continued and more has continued to do that, because these kids are just amazing. And of course, most of them aren't anymore. You know, you look at Matt Carter, for example, and Yoli, who's out there, filming. Dr. Matt Carter, that's right. Yeah. And so they've gone on and done really fantastic things. And it's a really lovely organisation to be involved with. I just love it. Yeah, it's really good.
Just on that subject of COVID, and it's like asking you to look into a crystal ball, but how do you see the sort of the future for dive shows? I mean, DEMA this year, for example, is also a virtual show, much like ADEX.
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, the meeting of people is such a huge part of the dive show, certainly in the past. And when I talk to people now, that's the bit they really miss. So it's the opportunity to really get together with like-minded people and meet those who are doing, you know, extraordinary things, because it's such an informal thing. But I do think that COVID will change it forever. So I suspect we'll morph into a sort of half and half, where, you know, you have to use the new technology as well. And you know, we may not be traveling for quite some time the way that we have been in the past. I think it's going to take quite a long time for that to happen. So that's going to make, it's going to be difficult for speakers to travel to wherever they're going to do their extraordinary thing, A. And B, then it's going to be hard to get them all together from an international basis. So it's a bit watch this space, but luckily in our neck of the woods here, we punch above our weight in extraordinary explorers and divers and, you know, capable people. So I think we're just, but it is very tricky. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, so I think we're getting, time's up, regrettably. And it's like all things, the time just sort of flies by. But thank you very much indeed. That was good to catch up again.
It's my pleasure, Strikely. Enjoyed it. It was
next time you're down in Sydney, and I'll let you take me for a coffee or something stronger.
All right, you're on. That sounds good. Sounds good.
No, Sue, thank you once again. And Nora, thank you.
Yeah, indeed. So I'd like to say thank you to Sue and also to David for sharing with us this interesting conversation with regards to being in the editorial landscape, to designing what do you call this, wetsuits and colors, and also talk a little bit about marketing for how it was like for a diving product then, and also of course like the possibility of having a hybrid event in the near future for dive show. So I think we've actually got a lot, and the posting itself has quite a lot of interaction, and I think everyone should have a look at the post. It's quite funny actually. So once again, I would like to say thank you to both for this session, and Sue and also David. Sue, maybe do you have any last any words of advice to your fans here on the Facebook post?
I don't know. Do I need to give someone advice on a Facebook post? I'll have to go and have a read
Yeah.
first, I think, before I
I think
say
so.
anything.
One of them's a bit long and wordy, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, I'll have a look, and then I'll answer if I can.
And sorry, one other thing. And the sessions are recorded, are they not, Nora?
Yes, they are.
So for people that are still asleep, they'll be able to watch it later.
Wisely.
So we'll get a link. We'll get a link for that.
We'll get a link for this what do you call this this recorded session, and we will put it up on the post itself. I'll share with you personally to David Strike and also Sue via email, and yeah, so if anybody missed this session, you can watch it for the next couple of days on Facebook, or if not, you can watch it on www.adex.asia.
Lovely.
Perfect.
Nora, thank you once again. And Sue, once again, thank you. It was absolutely delightful. And now we can all go to bed.
You all go to bed. Nice cup of tea, go to bed. That's right.
Okay.
Good. All right then.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night. See you.
You too. Bye. Bye. Bye.